In 2012, a genetic study shattered everything we thought we knew about human history. Scientists analyzing Ethiopian DNA found something that shouldn't exist. Evidence that while the rest of Africa remained isolated, Ethiopia became a genetic time capsule of encounters between populations separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. But the most shocking discovery wasn't what they found. It was what had been hiding in plain sight all along. Because Ethiopian DNA doesn't just tell the story of Africa, it rewrites the entire human saga. Every human outside Africa carries 2% Neanderthal DNA. It's the genetic signature of our ancestors' ancient encounter 60,000 years ago. But Ethiopians carry something different, something rarer. While Europeans met Neanderthals and Asians met Denisovans, Ethiopians preserved genetic memories of ghost populations. Ancient humans who left no bones, no tools, only genetic echoes in living cells. The Ethiopian highlands aren't just where humanity was born. They're where humanity kept coming back, wave after wave, creating genetic combinations that exist nowhere else on Earth. What you're about to discover will challenge everything from archaeological timelines to biblical stories. Because Ethiopian DNA isn't just unique, it's impossible to explain with our current understanding of history. Lucy died 3.2 million years ago in Ethiopia's Afar Depression, but she was just the opening chapter. In 2022, scientists made a discovery that rewrote human evolution. Analyzing the genomes of Afar people who still inhabit Lucy's homeland, they found genetic sequences that diverged from other humans 300,000 years ago, 1,000 years before our species supposedly existed. The Afar carry humanity's oldest Y chromosome lineage, AO0. So ancient it predates the common ancestor of all other living humans. They're not just descendants of early humans. They're living archives of a parallel branch of humanity. But here's where it gets strange. In 2019, computational biologist Dr. Pontus Skoglund discovered something in Ethiopian genomes that made him rerun his analysis 5 times. Ethiopians carry 4 to 7% of their ancestry from a ghost population, an archaic human group that separated from our lineage 500,000 years ago, then mysteriously reappeared to interbreed with modern humans in Ethiopia. No fossils of this population exist. No archaeological sites. They're known only from the genetic signatures they left behind, like fingerprints at a crime scene. The Homo kibish fossils, at 195,000 years old, prove modern humans evolved in Ethiopia. But when scientists compared ancient DNA from nearby sites to modern Ethiopians, they found something unsettling. Modern Ethiopians aren't just descended from Homo, they're descended from Homo plus something else. Dr. Sarah Tishkoff's team discovered that Ethiopians have more genetic diversity than entire continents. A single Ethiopian village can contain more genetic variation than all of Europe. But this diversity follows a pattern, as if multiple human species converged on Ethiopia over hundreds of thousands of years. Why Ethiopia? The answer might lie in the Denisovan connection. In 2018, researchers found Denisovan DNA in African populations for the first time in Ethiopia, but Denisovans supposedly never left Asia. The only explanation? A previously unknown branch of Denisovans lived in Africa, and their descendants survive only in Ethiopian bloodlines. The plot thickens with the Herto skulls. These 160,000-year-old humans had brain cases larger than modern humans. When scientists reconstructed their appearance, they looked unlike any living population, except for certain isolated Ethiopian groups who still share their distinctive features. The out-of-Africa theory says humanity left through Ethiopia 70,000 years ago, but Ethiopian DNA tells a different story, of multiple exits and, more mysteriously, multiple returns. Populations that left Africa 100,000 years ago somehow made their way back to Ethiopia, carrying genes from their travels. These weren't one-way journeys, they were loops, and Ethiopia was always the hub. The Guraj people speak a language that shouldn't exist. Linguists studying Ethiopia discovered something that defied explanation: Semitic languages in Africa. While Arabic spread through conquest, Ethiopian Semitic languages like Garage are different. They're older. They evolved in isolation. They're living fossils of a linguistic migration that genetics now confirms. When researchers analyzed Garage DNA, they found the speakers carry 50% Eurasian ancestry, but it arrived 3,000 years ago in a single massive wave. The same time their language appeared, genes and words traveled together, preserving a migration invisible to archaeology. But language was just the beginning. The Garage live at 3,000 meters, where oxygen is 40% thinner than sea level. Tibetans took 3,000 years to adapt to similar altitudes. Ethiopians did it differently and faster. They don't increase red blood cells like Tibetans, or enlarge lungs like Andeans. Instead, they evolved a unique solution: more efficient oxygen transfer at the cellular level. Dr. Cynthia Beale discovered Ethiopian Highlanders have a mutation in a gene called BHLHE41 that's found nowhere else on Earth. It appeared suddenly 5,000 years ago and spread like wildfire. In 5 millennia, it went from one person to millions. Natural selection on fast forward. But the medical mysteries run deeper. Ethiopian populations carry a variant of the APOL1 gene that protects against sleeping sickness, a disease that makes much of Africa uninhabitable. But this variant comes with a cost. It increases kidney disease risk, except in Ethiopians. They carry a second mutation that cancels out the negative effects. 2 perfectly matched mutations, too perfect for random chance. The Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews, spent 2,000 years claiming descent from ancient Israel. When geneticists finally tested them, they expected to find either proof or refutation. Instead, they found a paradox. Beta Israel DNA is predominantly Ethiopian, but buried within it are markers that trace to ancient Middle Eastern populations, not modern ones. These markers predate the Roman destruction of the temple. They predate the Babylonian exile. They match theoretical reconstructions of what ancient Israelite DNA might have looked like. History flows backward in Ethiopian blood. Dr. Tudor Parfit spent decades studying the Beta Israel. His conclusions shocked the academic world. Their version of Judaism preserves practices abandoned elsewhere 2,000 years ago. Temple-era rituals, pre-Talmudic laws, customs archaeologists only knew from ancient texts. Their DNA confirms it. Beta Israel carry the Cohen modal haplotype, the genetic signature of Jewish priests, but their version has mutations that don't exist in other Jewish populations. Mutations that take millennia to develop, as if they've been Jewish longer than Jews. When Israel airlifted 14,000 Beta Israel in Operation Solomon, they discovered something else. Despite centuries of isolation, Beta Israel showed less inbreeding than expected. Hidden in their DNA were traces of admixture with other Ethiopian populations, but only specific ones. Populations that also carried ancient Middle Eastern markers. A secret network of ancient bloodlines preserved for 2 millennia. But the greatest mystery came from studying Ethiopian religious diversity itself. Ethiopia is the only African country never colonized, the only one where Christianity arrived in the 4th century and survived surrounded by Islam. This religious isolation created genetic time capsules. Christian populations in the highlands preserved ancient DNA lineages extinct everywhere else. Muslim populations in Harar carry genetic signatures from medieval Arab traders frozen in time. Each religious group became a living museum of different historical moments. And when scientists compared them, they found something extraordinary. Despite religious separation, all Ethiopian populations share a common genetic signature from 3,000 years ago. The signature of a massive admixture event that affected every corner of Ethiopia. An event that coincides with the rise of the Aksumite civilization. An event that brought Eurasian DNA into Africa on a scale seen nowhere else. What force could cause such massive genetic change? The answer was hiding in ancient trade routes. The incense trade made Aksum rich, but it also rewrote Ethiopian DNA. For 1,000 years, Ethiopia controlled the trade routes between Rome and India. Every ship carrying frankincense and myrrh also carried genes. But unlike other trade centers, Ethiopia didn't just facilitate exchange, it absorbed it. Dr. Jason Hodgson's team discovered that Ethiopian populations show genetic signatures from 3 continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. But these aren't recent admixtures. They're layered like geological strata. each wave of traders leaving genetic sediment. The deepest layer dates to 3,000 years ago, the Sabaean migration from Yemen. These weren't conquerors, but merchants and craftsmen who brought writing, architecture, and their DNA. They didn't replace Ethiopian populations. They merged with them, creating the genetic foundation of the Aksumite Empire. But Aksum was just the beginning. The Nile River DNA Highway tells an even more incredible story. Ethiopian populations carry genetic markers that appear in ancient Egyptian mummies, but not modern Egyptians. The Blue Nile, originating in Ethiopia, carried more than silt to Egypt. It carried genes. Dr. Zahi Hawass's team, studying royal mummies, found Ethiopian markers in the 18th dynasty, the dynasty of Tutankhamun. But these weren't from slaves or traders. They were in the royal line itself. The pharaohs of Egypt's golden age carried Ethiopian blood. The connection runs deeper. Nubian pyramids, older than many Egyptian ones, show architectural similarities to Aksumite obelisks. When geneticists tested modern Nubian populations, they found they're more closely related to Ethiopians than to other Sudanese, an ancient kingdom spanning from Ethiopia to Egypt, connected by blood and stone. But the most shocking discovery came from analyzing trade route genetics systematically. Ethiopian DNA contains markers from India that don't exist in Arabia, suggesting direct maritime trade across the Indian Ocean. Markers from Greece that bypassed Egypt. Markers from Persia that predate Islam. Each impossible journey recorded in living cells. The Harla people built stone cities across eastern Ethiopia before vanishing in the 16th century. Archaeologists found their ruins but not their fate. Until geneticists tested the Harari people living in the ancient capital, they carry Harla DNA, but mixed with something unexpected. Ottoman Turkish markers, Portuguese markers, Yemeni markers, all arriving within a century of each other. The Harla didn't vanish. They absorbed every wave of visitor, creating a genetic record of the moment when medieval Ethiopia met the gunpowder age. This pattern repeats across Ethiopia. The Lalibela rock churches, carved in the 12th century, required thousands of workers. Genetic analysis of the surrounding population shows an influx of DNA from across the Christian world. Coptic Egyptians, Armenians, even Crusader-era Europeans, all drawn to create a new Jerusalem in the Ethiopian highlands. But why did Ethiopia become this genetic crossroads? Geography provides part of the answer. Ethiopia controls the headwaters of the Blue Nile and overlooks the Red Sea, but geography alone doesn't explain the genetic patterns. Other strategic locations didn't experience such massive admixture. The answer lies in Ethiopian culture itself. Unlike many ancient civilizations, Ethiopia actively incorporated foreigners. The Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's national epic, celebrates mixed heritage, the union of Solomon and Sheba. This cultural openness, combined with political power, created a unique genetic laboratory. But the genetic evidence suggests something more coordinated than random mixing. Ethiopian populations show admixture in waves, sudden influxes of foreign DNA affecting entire regions simultaneously, as if planned migrations brought specific skills and genes at crucial historical moments. The Sabaeans brought writing, Indians brought mathematics, Greeks brought medicine, each wave preserved in DNA. Modern Ethiopians carry this entire library in their cells, a genetic record of every civilization that touched the Horn of Africa. But also something more, combinations that exist nowhere else. When Arabian merchants married Ethiopian highlanders, their children inherited high-altitude adaptations plus desert survival genes. When Greek scholars married Ethiopian nobles, their descendants carried Mediterranean disease resistance plus African malaria immunity. Ethiopia became humanity's genetic laboratory, creating combinations that couldn't evolve naturally. The evidence is written in disease resistance. Ethiopians carry protective variants against malaria, sleeping sickness, tuberculosis, and smallpox, diseases from different continents. But instead of carrying one or two protections like other populations, many Ethiopians carry them all, a genetic Swiss Army knife of immunities. This explains a historical mystery. While diseases like smallpox devastated isolated populations, Ethiopia survived epidemics that should have been catastrophic. Their accumulated genetic defenses, gathered from 3 continents over 3 millennia, created a population uniquely equipped for survival. But survival against what? In 2020, COVID-19 revealed something unexpected about Ethiopian genetics. While the pandemic devastated populations worldwide, researchers noticed unusual patterns in Ethiopia. Despite limited healthcare infrastructure, certain Ethiopian populations showed remarkable resistance, not to infection, but to severe disease. Dr. Ephraim Engedawork's team discovered why Ethiopians carry variants in ACE2 receptors, the cellular doorways COVID uses to enter cells. But these weren't new mutations. They were ancient, predating written history, as if Ethiopian DNA had been preparing for coronavirus for millennia. This wasn't the first time Ethiopian genetics surprised medical researchers. The Human Genome Project, completed in 2003, used mostly European DNA. When scientists finally sequenced African genomes properly, they discovered the reference genome was missing huge chunks of human genetic diversity, most of it found in Ethiopia. Dr. Evan Eichler's team found Ethiopians carry genetic sequences completely absent from the human reference genome, not variants, entirely new sections of DNA. When they investigated these sequences, they found genes involved in brain development, immunity, and metabolism. Genes that might hold keys to understanding human evolution and disease. But the medical implications pale compared to what Ethiopian DNA reveals about human potential. Ethiopian runners dominate long-distance racing. The obvious explanation is high-altitude adaptation. But genetic analysis revealed something more complex. Ethiopian athletes carry a unique combination of variants affecting oxygen processing, muscle fiber composition, and energy metabolism. Not one supergene, dozens of small advantages that only work together. This combinatorial effect appears throughout Ethiopian genetics. Where other populations developed single adaptations to specific challenges, Ethiopians accumulated multiple solutions. Their DNA is like a library of human evolutionary experiments. Current research focuses on understanding these combinations. The Ethiopian Genetic Diversity Project, launched in 2019, aims to sequence 100,000 Ethiopian genomes, more than any other African country. Early results are already revolutionary. They've found Ethiopians carry functional variants of genes considered broken in other populations, genes that protect against diabetes while allowing efficient metabolism, genes that prevent hypertension while maintaining salt tolerance. Evolutionary paradoxes that shouldn't exist. But perhaps the most intriguing discovery involves the brain. Ethiopian populations show unusual variants in genes affecting neurotransmitter production. These variants correlate with lower rates of certain mental illnesses, but higher rates of specific cognitive abilities. Pattern recognition, language acquisition, musical ability, as if the genetic mixing created new forms of human consciousness. This raises profound questions about human potential. If 3 millennia of mixing created such genetic innovation, what might future generations achieve? Ethiopia provides a natural experiment in human genetic diversity, and the results suggest we've barely scratched the surface of human capability. But there's a dark side to this genetic treasure trove. As genetic testing becomes commercialized, Ethiopian DNA has become valuable. Pharmaceutical companies search for disease resistance genes. Athletic programs seek performance variants. The same openness that created Ethiopian genetic diversity now threatens it. The Ethiopian government has implemented some of Africa's strictest genetic privacy laws, but protecting genetic heritage while enabling beneficial research requires walking a tightrope. Ethiopia's genetic diversity isn't just a scientific curiosity, it's a resource that could benefit all humanity. Ethiopian DNA tells the greatest story never written. It speaks of ghost populations that haunt our genomes, of ancient migrations that loop through time, of genetic combinations that shouldn't exist but do, of human potential we're only beginning to understand. From Lucy to modern marathoners, from Beta Israel to Harari merchants, Ethiopia preserves every chapter of the human story in living cells. Not as fossils, as neighbors, not as history, as possibility. The evidence is overwhelming. Ghost populations preserved nowhere else on Earth, genetic combinations that defy evolutionary logic, disease resistances accumulated over millennia, cognitive variants that expand human potential, a living laboratory of human genetic diversity. Ethiopia isn't just where humanity began, it's where humanity keeps becoming. Every Ethiopian carries multitudes ancestors from 3 continents, adaptations from dozen environments, solutions to challenges we haven't faced yet. They're living libraries of human potential, walking repositories of evolutionary experiments. The question isn't what Ethiopian DNA tells us about the past. The question is what it tells us about the future. Because if 3,000 years of mixing created such innovation, what will the next 3,000 bring? As humanity becomes more connected, will we all become like Ethiopians, genetic cosmopolitans carrying the best of every bloodline? Or will we lose? Thanks for watching.